with no further ado, where is Kim?
Hi, I had trouble getting in. Sorry about that.
Okay.
We're just saying that, yeah.
All
Well,
right.
welcome, Kim. We're just delighted that you're here.
Are you all
And-
eating lunch?
Yeah, this is a conversation.
I
There you
expected
go.
everybody to be eating.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh.
Scott's drinking.
Oh, let me tell you. In the last few weeks, I started looking at the bottle at noon, thinking, "Is it time for a glass of wine yet?"
It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Can't you make a resolution for that, Miss Mayor?
Oh, I probably could. It's under emergency. Yeah. So, do you guys want me to talk now?
Go
Yes,
ahead.
please.
You're up. You came in just right.
Okay. Well, I thought what I would do is, last year I think I talked a little bit about with the group about being mayor in the first year, and so now we're into year 2, and this is not what I expected in year 2. Started out the year really working on the end of last year and starting this year, working on an effort for sustainability and healthy community. Pledged to do a tweet a day or a post a day about how to live more sustainably, and that was just going to kind of happen. And then we were going to have initiatives, and I was working to get a group together to say, what can we do to have Rochester really live the America City for Health title that we have and that is promoted. And I started a youth council. We do have a youth commission in town. It really isn't directed at college age kids, and it really isn't directed at the city. It's kind of middle school and high school kids, and the county runs it. So I thought, let's work on that. I have my whole first year and this year, I continue to work on our boards and commissions, which is the community engagement part of what happens at the city level. But it has been a tough nut to crack, and we've had a citywide training for all boards and commission members. We have had them evaluate themselves, and we have all that information. And I've been, trying to fill the open spots as they come available, but really trying to improve those boards and commissions so that they're meaningful. One of the ones I'll talk about in a few minutes. There is some dysfunction on the committees, and when we had that statewide training, I'm trying to tell committee members, this is your committee to give the city advice, and you have to take ownership of it. And what happens in some of them is that either the staff run it, or they don't follow. They're not actually even looking at what the bylaws say that they're supposed to be doing, and they kind of go off and do their own thing, which of course isn't helpful. And then when they do talk and they do come up with issues, how do those issues get handed off into who? And so we've been working on that. And as I said, it's taken a lot more time and effort than I thought. I thought that's something I could do year 1. It is definitely not. So the other thing that kind of was a year 1 to year 2 part of my first year and second year of mayor was the relationship with Harvard Bloomberg, which was it was a training for me and 3 of my administrators, and they were going to help us run the city better. How to do leadership, how to do budgeting, how to use data, how to work collaboratively, which is one of the topics we felt we needed to work more collaboratively with our other governmental agencies. I will say we went through the training and it fell apart, but because it was all underway and then the pandemic hit, I won't say they stopped, but we weren't able to get the support that we needed. And they shifted gears, as we all have, to focus on the pandemic and how we respond as a community. So all the work that we were doing in all those other areas I just mentioned, I won't say it completely came to a halt, but it definitely changed focus. So Harvard Bloomberg then switched their focus to how can we help you understand what's happening across the country and world with the pandemic? How can we give you accurate information? So it was with the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health primarily. Mm-hmm. How can we help you understand not only what's happening, but how to respond to it? What's the data showing? What are some good leadership techniques that you could use? And that was provided by the Harvard, sometimes the business school, sometimes the School of Public Health, sometimes our leadership program. And so, is this going through? Can somebody nod if this is working? Okay, my computer came up with a note saying the audio wasn't working, so thank you. So then So then we had weekly meetings. We just finished several months worth of weekly meetings. And they had, they were kind of fun. Mike Bloomberg always started with an introduction. And then after that, we would have a motivational speaker. My computer's saying this again, so I saw somebody saying it's, okay, I'll just keep trying. We have a motivational speaker. A lot of those were presidents. So we had President George W. Bush, we had President Clinton, we had President Obama, we've had Dr. Fauci, we've had Bill Gates, we've had two people whose names I can't remember, but are experts in their field in the area of budgeting and business, give us, kind of, they were motivational, but also talking about what it is, what it's like to lead in the time of great controversy. And they all gave examples of what they had done to help us understand what our role would be. Because there isn't really a training for this, as I'm sure you all know. So in addition to trying to now shift focus to how do we get ourselves through the pandemic, we have the political component, if you will, of the pandemic. It's really complicated getting people to work together to get through a crisis. I see a chat coming up. Is that something we should be looking at? Oh, stopping the video might help. Okay, I assume you don't want me to. Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I meant that if everyone would put them, stop videoing themselves, sometimes that helps the sound quality.
I'm going to shut down a couple of things on my computer screen to see if that helps too.
You actually sound good now, Kim.
Helping
Okay.
much better now.
I'm with you clear.
Okay, good. All right, so so I was talking about going through the Harvard Bloomberg, getting the support we need, and then the politics got in the middle of it. So it's been really hard to bring the community, the state, and the country together when the politics of do we need masks? Don't we? Do we need to shut down government? Don't we? Do we need, it's been back and forth. It's been very difficult to get our community, which typically when you have an emergency, when you have a crisis, what happens is a country pulls together in that crisis. That has not happened in this instance, not in our city, not in our state, and not in our country. We are actually, I'm shocked at how divided we are. And something as simple as, do we support science? Do we follow leadership? I mean, it's just, we've not had this kind of questioning before during a crisis as we do now, and at every single level. So Harvard Bloomberg and the speakers that we've had there have been trying to help us understand how to manage that. I will say it's been a little interesting because Rochester's, when I ran for mayor, you all know this, we've talked about it before, I really wanted to focus on policy, providing leadership, and I knew it would be a challenge, but there has been a significant amount of resistance to having a mayor provide that kind of leadership. Now, I will tell you, the funny thing about this is, as I'm dealing with the last Harvard Bloomberg call on the COVID had something like 500 mayors and city officials on it. In my cohort of mayors that I work very closely with internationally, there's about 40 of us. And those mayors take leadership and their community expects it, asks for it. It is your role as the mayor. Here, when I have done that, I have literally faced, what do you think you're doing? It's been quite shocking, actually. But the Harvard Bloomberg program has been very helpful to have my back, not just me personally, but have the mayor's backs in saying, don't let the politics or people who want you as a woman or you as a woman mayor or you as a mayor at all, not have the role that you're supposed to have in times of crisis. So they have been actually quite helpful, and we have each other. So the other thing I would tell you about the relationships we've had there is that we are able to support each other. There's a Women's Mayors Network, there's a Mayors Network, national and international, and we are able to talk to each other fairly regularly This morning, emails are coming about, are you having riots in your community? How are you responding? What are some things you found that are helpful? And we're able to share those things with each other. It's actually, it's been very nice. Especially when, as I've mentioned, there are forces out there that just don't want you to be seen as successful. There are forces out there that are publicly and online fighting. I'll say the sky is blue, and they're out there saying you don't know what blue is. It's literally that ridiculous. But it's if any of you are on my mayor's page, you will see it. There are 2 or 3 that are relentless. So anyway, so that's been going on, and so life changed during the pandemic. Everything is done like we're doing distant. I've had to use social media when you can't be out speaking to groups as one of the main ways to communicate. And I've tried to use that. I've done videos. I've done a children's read every Sunday to try to help with families who are having children who are frightened about the pandemic. I do videos periodically, try to message as I can. KIMT, I am on their speed dial. They're constantly calling me. It's kind of cute. And they're not, I don't think them as necessarily the name of the station in Rochester. I think of KTC and KAL. The KIMT is the one that is in Rochester every single day. There's hardly a day that goes by that they're not calling for an interview. So there's been a lot of that going on. The other thing you probably should know is that when you're in a crisis, we set up what's called our Emergency Operations Center on March 26th or 9th. Can't remember which exact day. We set up our EOC, and it was about the same time as I declared the city a state of emergency for our city. The county, the day before, I declared an emergency for the county, or a couple days before. I'm allowed to do that, but I have to have ratification by the city council within 3 days. So when I do things like a state of emergency, they need to ratify it, and they did. We stood up our Emergency Operations Center, and it's out at Fire Station 2 out here on Wheelock, I think it's called, Drive out on Viola, the new one up here, northeast. Unlike the county, who set theirs up in real time, they have actual bodies sitting in desks. We set ours up, and it's virtual. So we met literally daily, and we now have lowered it to like 3 days a week for our meetings. It was 5 days a week. Actually, it was 7 days a week when this first hit. So we have morning meetings, we touch base, we talk about policy. There's a separate EOC, Emergency Operations Center policy meeting. There's a joint meeting set up with the county, mail, and public health, and those are on Mondays and Fridays, so that we can share ideas and thoughts. And in addition to the EOC, which is different in the city and county, in the city, I lead the EOC. Now, I'm on every one of these calls, and I'm involved in the decision making. I take control of the call. I let our Ken Jones and Eric Kurska, who are the leads out at the center out there, they run the meetings, but we all participate in them, and I'm in a very active role, and I am considered the lead on our EOC. That is different than some of the other bodies, and there's been a little bit of confusion about why is the mayor butting in. Well, I'm butting in because I'm lead on the EOC, and while Eric and Ken are the ones that do the work, the day-to-day work, I do have a role in that. At the same time that happened, our city responded through really strong support from the city council, saying we're going to support our residents, we're going to support our businesses. And the way we're going to do that is to stand up some meetings. So we stood up an economic stability, and I would say economic stability, and now it's changed into economic recovery team in our city staff. We stood up a homelessness task force, and we set up a neighbor to neighbor and food security task force. And those 3 started in March and have worked. And the 4th thing we set up was a call center. Some of these things the county eventually stood up, or they had a different type of, like they had a healthcare call, if you had a call about healthcare or your health, they had a call set up. We were getting lots of calls about things that weren't healthcare related. We eventually merged the 2, which I think was brilliant. It's worked very well, and they log every call. We know what topic people are calling about. We know who they're referred to. And just for your information, our public library took control of not only the call center, in support from the county, who of course took the healthcare calls as lead on the healthcare part of it. But they also stood up the day center for our homeless. So while the county shifted their warming center to Mayo Civic Center, the library stepped in and said, we'll do the day center part of it. So our library, I don't know if you're all aware, I mean, you're all aware, they were award winning and they're a wonderful library, but the amount of work they have done during this pandemic for the city is just, and they're doing drive-by library work too. And I should mention, they had a flood right at the end, at the first of the year, that ruined their library that they are still, they've just recovered from. I think the work is now done. So they've been phenomenal. Terry Spaeth, who some of you know, did the economic development work, and from that generous, the funding that the city council approved, $250,000 in no or low interest loans, depending on how you, as a business person, utilize that money, and $100,000, $50,000 from DMC, $50,000 from the city for grants, and that's for businesses to help other businesses during the pandemic keep their business open and functional. That went on. We gave some money to the small business development program so that they could provide support to businesses to help apply for state, federal, and local loans. We funded that. So that team has been working in a partnership with all the agencies you would expect: the Chamber, Rochester Downtown Alliance, READY, which is our Rochester Area Economic Development Group, DMC, and some representatives from small businesses. They've just been wonderful. Now they're working on setting up kind of they're calling it Rochester Ready. And so how can we designate businesses that have complied well with all the safety precautions, so that when patients, which, you know, I'm getting calls every day, is it safe to come to Rochester? Are you having riots? Is it safe to come to Rochester? Do you mask? Get those calls every single day. I have to assure people they'll be safe. Also knowing that there are people around here who won't wear masks, and we don't know if a riot will break out tomorrow. I'm doing the best I can to assure people, you know, on a day-to-day basis as they call, the state of our city and how important it is that we provide that really safe and secure environment for all those people now coming back at the same time. And so they're going to do this Rochester Ready designation where businesses will be, you know, we're a business that's safe and welcoming for people that are medically fragile, or, you know, we're going to require masks of visitors and our staff. So that's all going on. And then I'm sure you're aware there were 2 huge food drops that the city helped fund and man for, I think there was one on May 30th or 29th, right in that time. And then, I'm sorry, March 20th, 29th, and then there was one in May as well. So there are 2, they served 1,200 cars the first time, and a little less than, maybe 1,100 the second time. And they're figuring from the numbers, the second time they actually took head counts, and I think there are 5,000 or 6,000 people were served on that one. So that's food. They also provided information, because we can't keep doing food drops. Where can you get help? Because a lot of the people right now that are getting help aren't, it's not just the people that got it before who have always been on the edge. When you've lost your job, and maybe both people in a household have lost their job, either temporarily or permanently due to COVID, they don't know where to go for help because they never thought they'd be in this position. And so we wanted to make sure that they knew how to get the help that they needed, that they didn't have to feel bad about asking for help, and that now moving into the future, that they're assured of getting the help they need until their lives change. So now this last week, as you know, we have yet another emergency on top of an emergency. Boy, we live in interesting times. Someone sent me that note this morning, and I said, understatement of the year. We do indeed. We have a lot of racial tension due to George Floyd's murder up in the Twin Cities. So far in Rochester, we have had 3 successful rallies and protests. We have another 1 or 2 scheduled for this weekend, and another one that I know of the weekend after. Thursday this week is the funeral. That's often a really emotional time for people. We are working on, with community, 2 different groups in the community that are working on murals, and we're going to try to provide them a vehicle for that mural out in a park, maybe 2 parks, because one, I think, has the murals done, they just need a place to put it. The other one, we're putting up boards, and there's an art teacher in town who wants to help people heal through the arts on doing that. We're also talking with Audrey Betcher about setting up perhaps a community read on systemic racism and bias. And, if we all read and learn at this time, maybe that will be helpful. Working with, I mentioned this earlier, our boards and commissions, we have a kind of, I guess I would say, a little bit of a dysfunction and not a fully staffed police. There's two police committees. One is the Police Civil Service Commission, which does hiring. That one we just filled with a new person that will be starting this month. But that's a 3-person board, and that person works on hiring and promotions. And we've been working for the last year on making sure we have a diverse police force. And someone went and dug up the numbers and said, it's not very diverse. Well, we're only working on new classes of new hires. The rest of the body that's in there is the body that's in there. And there's not much you can do about that. We're not letting people go so that we have diversity, of course. That doesn't even make sense. But so our new hiring classes have women, persons of color in multiple different cultures. And that's going well. We're also providing good training and mentorship, and we will be reviewing our training. But we have I think 80% of the police force currently has undergone the training for de-escalation, which is a remarkable number. I think 100% of them have gone through lethal use of force training, so that we make sure that they know what's the right thing to do. So we're working on that. There will be other things that we'll continue to look at. We've been looking just in generally at our community, our city, for this whole last year, working with the HR department to make sure that we have non-biased and fair hiring processes in place in the community. And some of you may have questions, and maybe we just can go to Q&A at this point. I probably talked enough. You're probably bored. But let people ask questions. I know there's a video or two that have been out there running around. I'm happy to talk about those if you want. I don't know where you want to go with the discussion, but that's been year 2, which is, it seems like it's been 3 years ago when the year 2 started, but it's only been 3 or 4 months ago. It's been a lot.
Okay, so unmute yourself if you have a question.
Kim, oh, go ahead, Bruce.
How's your husband?
I will say, so needless to say, I've been under a little bit of stress, and my time has been day and night for the last 3 or 4 months between COVID and what's happening now. And I'm not very available at home. And I think he's hurting, frankly, to be quite honest. He's feeling ignored, that our family isn't a priority. And after I left the legislature and I came home, I committed to making sure my family was a priority and that wouldn't happen. And it is happening. And there's not a whole lot I can do about it. I took the day off yesterday, and this is a joke. It's the first day I've had off. It's the second day I've had off since January 1st this year. But they weren't days off from work. They were days off from online meetings. I spent both of those full days, probably 10 hours doing paperwork. I did not even touch the boards and commissions, which is what I'd hoped to get to, because there's so much other things that you have to do that you can't get to when you're in online meetings all day long. So of course, then in the evening, I'm exhausted. He's exhausted from the work that he does as a therapist, and it's not good. So thank you for asking. It's stressful right now, but we'll be fine. We gotta get through this, right?
Kim, this is Brent Fisher. Question, you mentioned there's protests, obviously, that have been going on. There's been 3, I think you said.
Yep.
There's a couple organized for this weekend. Is there a process for this kind of stuff where people are reaching out to the city? I've never been involved with something like that. So, or do you provide a particular space that say this is a safe space for you to congregate? I mean, how's all that work?
So in a normal year, in a normal time, when we're not in a pandemic, when you're not supposed to be congregating, right? We're not supposed to be congregating. Outside, I think you can have groups of 50. These have been 500. The one last Saturday was 500 people that were in the streets that marched. About half to 2/3 wore masks. Mayo handed out 200. No one knew there would be 500. Some people brought their own, of course. There were families and children. In normal times, people would contact City Hall. They'd say, we're going to have a march and we need the park reserved, or we need the City Hall reserved. They would do those kinds of things. Well, City Hall is just starting to open this week. People don't give a damn, frankly, in their anger and hurt right now about whether the police in City Hall, they don't even want the police involved for the most part, although I'll let you know how we handle that. They're not asking for permission, they're just planning them. And they're planning them on social media. And so we are scanning social media constantly to try to find out what's happening when, so that we can be prepared, because you don't know, and the Emergency Operations Center is aware, they're involved in this now moving forward. You don't know when a normal, peaceful protest will turn into not so peaceful. And I will tell you, on the one night, and the reason I called, it was one of the two reasons I called the curfew for the Saturday night, is because Friday night, the wonderful, peaceful groups that met during the day, there were 2 of them, suddenly those people went home. 2 of them stayed, but all of a sudden this group that wasn't involved in that showed up, and it started turning into something that was, it was still a protest. It was a more angry protest, but it was just independent people that gathered. It wasn't an organized event. And so the police, of course, have to be involved in that, because we don't know what's going on. The ones we get advance notice of, I let the police department know, they let the sheriff and the fire know, so that we can clear streets and we can do what we need to do, because they haven't asked for permission. And I know there's some people angry about that, but folks, City Hall isn't open. The processes that you go through typically, I mean, they can call, these are young people who organize, they haven't a clue. They haven't a clue. And as I said, they really don't want establishment who they feel has caused all this they don't really care. Now, we have contacted each of them. We have said we will be there to protect you. If you want someone to speak, they haven't wanted people to speak. I did speak at one, and I can tell you why, but they don't really want that. These are young people who've organized that want their own voice heard, and they don't really want anyone else. We have provided police protection, some more visible, some not, depending on the group's response, because what we don't want to do is incite a riot. And we almost had that happen at City Hall when the sheriff's show of control of City Hall was viewed behind the glass, and it really incited a couple of the individuals who saw that as posturing, and it made them angry. And I'm watching it on television because I wasn't there, and I could see what was happening. And so I hopped in my car and I drove down. And in the meantime, our city lawyer went out and said, would you like the mayor to talk? The people said, yeah, bring her on. So I showed up about that time, and I stepped in front of the group and talked. It wasn't what I intended to do. In the meantime, the sheriffs, they closed the screens and made the sheriffs move off so they weren't visible. Because the anger right now in the community is at law enforcement, right? And law enforcement's used to protecting they're protecting their building, but the 2 were counterproductive. That it was causing more problems than it was solving. So as soon as we took them out and I started just chatting about what we're doing in the city, things diffused and that one broke up. But there were still people that gathered downtown, and we did have a couple car windows, I think a police car window and one civilian that was there. His parked car got broken, and one glass on Broadway. And so we did decide, because we were hearing the groups from out of state, and they were coming in to Minneapolis. They came into Mankato and Duluth. They did not come into Rochester, or if they did, it was such a small contingency that there was nobody out there to instigate a problem with. But I have to tell you, for every action I have taken, I've been yelled at for that action by another group on the other side who say, how dare you tell me I can't come out of my house and protest. So it's been, no matter what I do, I get beat up. The second day, we felt like we had things under control enough that if people wanted to have peaceful protesting, we were going to let them. And that is what we ended up doing. I'm not sure. Each day we look at differently and evaluate what's the feel in the community. What do we think will happen? And the protests moving ahead, one of them just reached out to me and asked that I be there, and has contacted the city for support. So that did happen now for this next one.
Kim, this is Andy Telges. I was wondering if you could speak more to the Rochester Ready program and what the timeline might be and what some of the major qualifiers would be, and if it's intended to include all types of businesses.
Yes, it is. Kathleen Harrington is trying to help us with this too. So Kathleen would be a good contact. Holly with downtown. I'm trying to think who else. Aaron Parrish with our city, and Aaron Sexton from Mayo Clinic are working on this because, as you know, Andy, in the hotel business, we had a couple, when Mayo first opened it back up, we had some horrific communications from people. Literally, the family came in on Friday for their Monday appointment to get settled. I think they had a doctor appointment Friday afternoon, and then their whole week was supposed to, there was a surgery scheduled. The hotel they stayed at had, I won't even go into detail, it was horrific. They switched hotels, found another one. Finally, I put her in contact with Kathleen Harrington. They went home, they canceled all their appointments and went home. That will kill our economy and our community if that happens. So between that and the calls I've been getting, and patients have been saying to Mayo, they're not wearing masks. I have a health condition. I can't go into a business that doesn't wear a mask. You know, it could kill me. And it may have killed them right now with the COVID, it's pins and needles. So we are trying to set up something so that a business can be, you have to follow all the state guidelines, all the OSHA guidelines, and you would wear masks, both your employees, and you would ask people coming in your store whether you provide the mask or you just put a sign that masks required. That is where they're heading. I don't know that it is up and running yet. I'm not directly involved with that. And I go to the meetings on occasion, but I haven't been at the last couple. So I don't know how quickly they're going to do this. But I don't know how I can, and the community know. I don't want to scare people. Our whole economy, this whole community's economy is centered around providing quality health care. And if people don't think they can come here and they stop coming here, our hotels, our businesses, our restaurants, and our bars are not going to make it. They rely on those 3 million visitors a year. They don't just rely on community members, folks. And I think we like to think that, that it's just us. And I've worked really hard to make sure that all those people keep us in mind, because I don't want the community to be left out. But if people don't come back to Mayo, we're not going to survive. I mean, it's going to kill businesses downtown. And yes, you can, some of you probably want to scream at me that stay-at-home orders killed businesses. Yes, it's hurt them. But the state and federal and city government has tried to step up to provide Band-Aids. And I know they're only Band-Aids when you're bleeding. We are trying to do what we can, but we want to get you back up and running ASAP. And that cannot happen if people are afraid to come here, or if they come here and get COVID. Or if they come here, there's a riot. All those things are, possible today. Feel free to yell at me. I can take it. There's nothing anyone on this line can say to me that I have not heard already. So feel free.
Kim, I was wondering, you mentioned a youth program for middle school children. What is that?
The Youth Commission, which is a leadership. Yeah, it's a youth leadership program. It was a city-county joint program that really kind of the county runs more than anyone else. And that program was, it's to develop leadership and have projects in town. That's been going on now I was on the Youth Commission as an adult mentor back in the day. So that's how long ago it's been, 25 years, maybe longer. What I'm looking for is input from older youth, high school and college youth, about what do we need to do in this community. And some of it's why we're rioting. Youth today are fed up with our generation, who they feel has failed them. And we can all argue about whether we failed them or not. They feel like we failed them. We failed them on climate change. We failed them on gun safety. We failed them on protecting them and giving them a good education. We failed them on racial justice. They feel like we failed them. And we all have our personal opinions about that, but it's the young people, the future leaders, who are telling us, you guys aren't listening. So I was trying to put this youth council together to thread that needle, we have to, us old timers, all, you know, we're part of the community too. So they can't just, you know, they want to, but they can't get rid of us. Well, maybe COVID will get rid of some of us, but you know, they're not going to get rid of us. We're here. But how can we make sure that the youth are feeling heard and that there are at least enough changes that they can help initiate where they feel like this world is being prepared for them?
Kim, it's Denise Kelly. I just want to say that I admire all the services that you've been providing to the city, and I think you've been very visible. And I don't fault anything that you've done. So thank you so much. I see too that, you know, the governor gets a little bit more defensive as things go along. And I just think that our leaders in Rochester and Minnesota are doing such a great job. And, you know, you kind of wonder, how do they hear that? How do they hear that message? So just my 2 cents worth.
I appreciate that. And I'll just say, you know, social media is good and bad because of the internet. And we've been able to continue to have meetings like this, to have meetings. I mean, my days are meetings from morning till night. My rear end must have, you know, broadened about 4 feet sitting on a chair as long as I have now for the last 3 months. But that's all we do. But what if we didn't have the internet? I mean, we couldn't keep, a lot of businesses are running and still have, you know, still are active because of what the internet has done. But social media can be ugly. And I will just say, people have reached out to me privately and publicly now, finally. They weren't for the first several months, but now people, because they've seen what's happening, there are a few very angry people in this community who have decided that I am their punching bag. And they take nothing more than pleasure every day out of going on social media and calling me names and pointing out, you know, my hair, you know, it's everything. Everything I do is wrong. And my husband always says, "Your three mean things were said. Only 3. Why are you so upset?" I'm like, because those glare at you. Those insults glare at you and they hurt. They're deep. They hurt deep, you know. It's like, how do you let those go and still go about doing what you have to do? And some people are like, well, you're not mad enough. You're not doing this. I'm like, it's not my job to incite riots. It's my job to address the issue and keep the community calm and moving ahead. And some people just don't want that. And I'm not picking on a partisan, because this is both sides of the spectrum. And believe me, I know who they are, and both sides of the spectrum are out to do it. I see Mike Becker has his hand raised. I don't know how to make that work, Mike. Oh, over here. Okay.
I got it. Kim, you and I have exchanged emails in the past about frustration, and I know where you're at. Rotary recently, we were granted, each district was granted $25,000 just to come up with some type of program to assist in COVID-19 in communities. Do you see a way for our local Rotary clubs to come about or come together and do something to assist in the community as far as a project or some type of way we can help?
Oh, there's so much need out there. You know, one of the things, Mike, that might be interesting is to look at our call center data and see what we're getting the most calls on. And so if you'll follow up with me, I think I can get you that information, because that will give us a clue, at least the people who have been reaching out, what their needs are. I know from the city, we sent money to, we've been lost money to Channel 1, and we've been working with them to get food out. And the school district, frankly, we took over school lunches during spring break earlier this year. So there is that, but this is delicate, and for those of you that this is going to irritate, let me just acknowledge this is going to irritate you right up front. We have people in our community who have lived here their lifetime who cannot take advantage of government programs, and they are hurting. And so I've made sure that I've sent some money on my own personally to organizations that I think can help those individuals who are working, who are paying taxes, I lost my screen.
Well, we still see you.
We can hear you. Don't curse. Oh, she froze. So, Doug, question. Since we're blaming her for everything else, do we blame her for this?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay.
Slow internet. There. Hi, Kim. Mm. Well, well.
Mike, did you get an answer to your question?
Well, she had trouble getting on the first time. Maybe she's having trouble getting back on.
Is the
Yeah.
mayor still there?
Mhm. I don't know.
There she is.
I'm back.
Well, hi.
Kicked me off.
Yeah,
Okay.
Mayor, first of all, I'd like to thank you for serving in such a difficult time. I know you didn't ask for it, a pandemic to be during your term, but here we are faced with it. But I think you're doing a fantastic job. Okay.
Thank you.
And I have a little quote. I'm a Dr. Seuss enthusiast. I have all his books. I used to read to when my grandchildren were younger, all of them, but I have this sign over my hearth when you come in my house: be who you are and say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter and those who matter don't mind. You know, given that what you're telling us about how people attack you, they're just not worth it. Anyway, that's
Thank you for that. That's what my husband says too. It's still hard not to react.
So I understand that. I've been in that situation.
Yeah.
And a number of things when I used to work with kids who were adjudicated by the delinquent and so forth. So I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I wanted to finish answering Mike's question too. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I need to be mindful of that. I know. One of the groups is St. Vincent de Paul Society. That's the one I was telling you about. So there are many nonprofits: United Way, Family Service Rochester. There's a bunch of them that are helping in the cause during COVID. St. Vincent de Paul was one that is willing to not ask too many questions of people's backgrounds, but to make sure that they're not losing their rent. And it's a particular population that it's our Hispanic population who has been hit very, very hard with COVID because of the plant over there that they worked at. They've been sent home. They've lost their jobs, not permanently, but if you've been exposed to COVID, they send you home and you sit home. They can't apply for many of them, and even those that, and you may or may not be surprised to hear this, but many of those that could qualify are so afraid to, with what's happening in this country now. It's like they're just hunkered down and hiding, and some of them need help. They need help with rent. The one thing on rent, people aren't allowed to be evicted, but when this pandemic is over and that thing is lifted, all of them their rent is going to be due. all the rent for 3 months. They're not going to have 3 months worth of rent. They're using that money to survive. So, so that's, you know, working with some of those organizations and calling them and talking to them about those needs is perhaps something you want to do. There's a bunch of them, and it's not this St. Vincent de Paul we used for the Hispanic community in particular because it's not a governmental agency. Nobody's going to threaten them and look, you know, I want to see documents or whatever. They're a little more open to just saying, if you need help, let's talk. And they do individually interview. So they make sure that the money goes to people who really need it. And so do all those others, United Way, Family Service, Channel One.
Kim, I will drop you an email.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Other?
Kim, you indicated you were working internationally with mayors.
Hmm?
How do you have an interpreter or interpreters that help you speak to people who don't use English?
They all use English, Bruce. Every one of them.
All right, thank you.
Every one of them. We got Poland, we got Accra, we got, I mean, it's Germany, we've got, I mean, mayors from all over the world. Some of, you know, English is maybe a second, well, English is a second language for most of them, but they all are fluent in English.
Thank you very much.
The only person, me, who can't speak another language usefully, Americans that don't necessarily, I mean, even though we have French, German, and whatever in our schools, we don't learn to speak it fluently. These other countries somehow do a better job with the fluency than we do.
Thank you.
Hey, Kim, this is Dan Soderberg.
Hi, Dan.
How are you doing? So I was appalled when I saw that video, obviously, officer, and so is the rest of the world. But do we have anything like that? And do we have a problem in Rochester, do you think? I mean, is my eyes just closed and I just don't even have an idea that this stuff happens?
So the brutality with our officers are trained, you never put a knee on anyone's neck, you know, the back neck area ever. You can use a shoulder blade. You can put a knee on a shoulder blade if you have someone that's violent and typically it's when you're putting cuffs on. Once they're cuffed, and this guy had been cuffed for quite some time, there was just zero need for that. He may have resisted getting in the car, but they should, that just never, you know, if you had got to get him down on the ground for a minute and pick him up and get him in, fine, but 9 minutes of kneeling on someone's neck, completely out of line. The one thing I will tell you, Dan, I've talked to a lot of people, some of them our age and older that are community leaders that are African-American, and they will tell you, Sandra Means, George Thompson, Jackie Trotter, I mean, it can go on the list. They get stopped all the time. When they're in a store, are you shoplifting? They get followed around. Their car gets pulled over. And you know, it's called driving while black. I've gotten phone calls this week. People get pulled over for driving while black, and they're questioned differently than you and I would be questioned. Where's the pot? One mother called and said her daughter was coming home from a school study session, African-American, it's a biracial family, got pulled over and they said, where's your pot? That was the first words out of someone's mouth. Well, where's the pot? Come on. That's not what you and I would be asked.
No.
So license, you were speeding, you know, you'd find out why were you pulled over. And so I think and it's not everyone, most, you know, the cops are trained, but sometimes you get someone who's just a little bit of a, you know, aggressor. And we have to find those people and train them or not hire them, you know, to be on our police force. But yes, I have another individual that called. I know her husband's black. She said, the night of the curfew, is my husband going to be safe driving to work? He leaves one job. I think he comes home for a while, sleeps, and then he has another job that he has to get to just a few hours, you know, 10 p.m. and it's past curfew. Is he going to be pulled over? She said he gets pulled over all the time. I mean, I just, as a white woman, I've been pulled over 2 times since I've lived in Rochester, both for speeding, and it was on Elton Hills Drive both times. I was guilty, I admit it. I'm very careful now on Elton Hills Drive. That's an easy one to speed on, up and down and curves and whatever, and it's a wide road. But that's 2 times in 25 years. Philander Castile in the Twin Cities got pulled over 26 times in 1 year. Here in town, you talk to individual 26 times in 1 year. And here in town, it's not quite that bad, but yes, it happens. And my African-American friends and people of color say, I feel like I'm being targeted because of my race. So if people tell me they're feeling that way, I believe them. I hear it too often to not believe them. And so we're working with the police department to make sure that people are well trained, that we're hiring more diverse police force. And when that diverse police force is hired, that they are mentored. Because one thing that does happen is then we don't necessarily, you hire a diverse police force and they don't stay in our community. They go on someplace else where there's more diversity or they feel more comfortable. So we're trying to provide mentorship and yeah, I know it's hard, Dan. You know, I've had this conversation with my husband and with others, you know, not in Rochester. Yeah, sadly in Rochester too, but we're trying really hard here. And the use of force, our guys have gone through that training. Can't say everybody's 100%. And as someone told me in the police department, it's easy to fall back on old behaviors. So if you're a cop that's been around for 30 years and trainings were different 30 years ago, you know, you got to be really diligent that you don't fall back into an old behavior. And so they do ongoing training to make sure that doesn't happen, because the more training, the more practice, the more times you use the newer techniques, it becomes the go-to thing, right? Yep. Like anything. So we're aware of it and working on it. I wish I could say, no, Dan, we don't have any problems, but that would not be true.
Well, thank you for your honesty. I mean, I have Afro-Americans that work for me. I mean, I don't care what color someone is. I mean, if they can do the job, I'm happy.
I'm sure you are.
Know, so, but it is, and I haven't had really any issues at all over the many years, but we don't have a huge, you know, pool either. So,
well, I will tell you this, with DMC and city watching our minority and women owned businesses and minority and, you know, I know that's a challenge for a lot of businesses.
Yes, it is.
It is. And we're a community that isn't as diverse as the Twin Cities, where they're, you know, you can just open the doors and people walk in. Here you have to sometimes look. There's some really great trainings that have been happening out at RCTC in the building trades, which has been terrific. A lot of women, a lot of minorities in that group. I went to one of their little graduations and was thrilled with the group there. But I think when I looked at the numbers of who's been affected by unemployment, the Black African-American community in particular has been devastated by what just happened. They're not alone. We've all been devastated, but in particular, they've been devastated by it. So anything we can all do to help as we start hiring back. The one thing I fear, and I've seen it in my own family, is that because the unemployment insurance bonus was so generous, people are living better now on unemployment and the $600 a week bonus than they were living before, and they don't want to go back to work. And, you know, that's a sad state of affairs when that's where we're at in this country, but it is. And we're going to have to address that if we want people to come back to work. You know, I know for you, when you're trying to.
Well, the position it puts me in is I'm going to, if I go to hire a guy and he says no, then I have to push the issue of cutting off his unemployment, which is a terrible position to put me in.
It is. That's what they've done, though. I know.
And at first, I wouldn't even think about doing that. The other question, switching back to COVID, you know, and all that I mean, I've spent a ton of time reading, and I've done quite a bit here at my shop trying to protect people. Trying to protect construction workers in the field is much harder. I think I've done an excellent job at my shop, but I've got people working at home here. I've built temporary walls. I got super HEPA filters coming. You know, we've done as much as I can, but in trying to figure out how long, I mean, if you were going to look into the future, are we 2 years, a year? I mean, it's really hard to plan when you don't know what's coming at you.
It is. And so I will just say two things about that. One, we don't have a time frame. The people at the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, you know, on the Harvard program say, you know, 18 months. I know the federal government is pushing things to happen faster, and they are doing the research faster. But most of the research fails. And so they're pushing, you know, let's try this, let's try that. You know, this one looks promising, but they often fail by the time they get to the end of the trials, which is why they have to do them and not just race out doing something that doesn't work. They could be spending a lot of time and money on something that isn't going to come to fruition. And so we just don't know. But they're saying, you know, it could be 18 months or so before we feel like we have any sort of grip. And that's assuming that this isn't, and I hate to even say this, but the reality is that's assuming that this isn't like the common cold where you just keep getting it over and over and over. And my, I have a cousin who's a nurse practitioner. She's a primary care provider in an Indian reservation in Arizona. So she's not here. She's had it twice.
Holy shit.
As a provider. So she said, you know, I don't think there's an immunity that this virus, and part of it depends upon how bad your first case was. You know, maybe if you had a mild first case, the second case could be worse or vice versa. But she's had it twice and she's a medical care provider. So, you know, it's really scary and we don't know. And the other thing I'll say was, the one thing that I'm having the biggest angst about right now is we know that our Black and minority communities are the ones most negatively impacted by COVID. And yet the protesters that are out there not wearing masks, by and large, are young people, which that's good because they don't get it as bad, but are a lot of our minority communities who can then take it home. And even though they're young and they're going to be fine, they're going to take it home and give it to their mom or dad or grandma and grandpa. We also know that because of the health disparities, many of our minority populations have the worst health and the worst health outcomes, which means they have diabetes and heart disease and, you know, asthma and all the other things that are going to make COVID deadlier. So I'm, you know, I don't want to be overly dramatic, but, you know, in a couple weeks, we could be seeing a really bad outbreak in our minority communities and in all communities, because it's not just, you know, the minority community. I don't want to lead anyone to believe that's out protesting. It's a lot of people. So I am worried. And I wish I could say, yep, we'll have a cure in 6 months, but I don't think that's the case.
Yeah. No, sometimes I think I should just shut the whole place down and go hide for 2 years, but that's.
We need you, Dan, don't you dare.
No, we're not doing that, but I got 2 kids that just had babies and, you know, trying to keep everybody safe. And
I haven't seen my grandkids since February, and they've all had birthdays. 3 of my children have had birthdays. I didn't even get them gifts because I hadn't been able to, you know, go out shopping and drive to see them, or, you know, and I know we're all feeling that way. And my in-laws are in a senior living facility that a staff member tested positive, and 5 of the patients are now showing symptoms. So, you know, it could just happen, and there's just nothing we can do. We all just kind of live hoping it's not us, but knowing that eventually, if you're older and it gets in a nursing home, it probably will be.
so you talked about those 18 months. I mean,
I'm hoping that's the long end.
Yeah, but do you believe in those 18 months that the odds are the way to get through this if we all get it anyways, isn't it? I mean, is that what the experts are really thinking?
Well, some people believe in herd immunity. Herd immunity only works if it can't be gotten again and again. It is unclear, and it's starting to be a little more clear that this isn't something that's just going to go away. And some of the research is showing that it is not the virus that they thought it was, that it actually affects, it causes blood clotting and it gets involved in your circulatory system, and you might be getting, it might be affecting things that are going to come back later, even if you don't get COVID again later, or if you do, it could cause an increase in that. We don't know. I mean, there's so much research out there, which is why it's so frightening. And so the herd immunity concept, it sounds good on the surface. Just let all the old people die. All the rest of us will get it and we'll be fine. I mean, that doesn't sound good, but that's what a lot of people are saying. And that's their answer. It isn't that simple because we don't know enough about this disease and we don't know if there's any immunity to it. So it's not really the answer. And I'm frankly not interested in just saying, let all the old people die, or people that, like my daughter who just turned 30. Well, I guess the one that's sick is 32 or 3, who has a very serious autoimmune disease. And if she gets it, it will kill her. There's no question. And so she's been locked in her house for 3 months. And every day the phone rings, I'm afraid, you know, something's happened. And she's, you know, 32 years old. But, you know, she just happens to have a rare condition, and this will kill her. There's no question.
Okay, Rachel, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah. Do you have, I'm sorry, I can't see the chat thing. I'm on 2 screens are open at the same time because I got frozen out. I'm sorry.
Sure. Hi, I'm Rachel, community member in Rochester. I'm just wondering, you mentioned that the police department is undergoing trainings and mentorships. I did read that 80% of the police department has undergone de-escalation training. Are these listed anywhere online where the public can view maybe who has partaken in those different trainings, or some statistics on that?
We can get data for things, and it's one of the things, and so I am, just as another piece of information, I'm trying to call together the Police Oversight Committee. We do have a Police Oversight Committee. It's a citizen committee. It has not been running very well, and it now has an opening that I haven't been able to fill because of the pandemic, because they're not meeting. They are allowed to look at data that they asked for, and if some of you have seen the video that kind of went viral out there, that individual, had he filed a complaint, that complaint would have been brought forward to this committee. They would have reviewed the case and made recommendations. When people don't file complaints, nothing goes before that board. That board, however, has been a little dysfunctional, and so we don't have as much data. We can't give any names. That's there are just federal and state laws that say no, you can't release that kind of information. But we could get the numbers. How, like 80% have gone through the de-escalation training, 100% have gone through the use of force training. I can get you the data on our new hires, because we've done pretty well with our new hires, hiring minority. And as I kind of got chewed on by not nicely, by the barbershop folks the other day about, well, were they African American? Well, I said, as a woman, we have very few women on the police force. I want women on there too. I don't want it's not, oh, Doug, you're disappearing. Is that okay?
Yep, you're okay.
Can you guys still hear me? Okay, I've got, law enforcement course offerings up here. That's a sheriff, very different. Well, they may be ours too, but just that's the county and the city do things differently, but this could be generic. There's our training center. So anyway, that's distracting, sorry. So we can get numbers for you. We can't get you names. We could get percentages for you. This is the kind of thing that Civil Service Commission should be doing, and I hope is doing, and maybe hasn't been doing. And so we have an opening on that right now. I need to fill two openings. The Human Rights Commission hasn't sent their name because they're having their own bylaw issues. They will send someone to it as required by our city charter, our city policies. I get to appoint 5. They were all appointed before I got here, so I've had no appointments to that committee until now, where the chair has stepped down. So I have 1 now that I can fill, and it's a 7-member board. So this is just a FYI. I personally think 7 isn't enough. What happens is only 2 or 3 people end up making decisions if they can't get a quorum. So I'm moving the city, and the city council isn't really thrilled with it, but I'm moving toward 9-member boards. I know 5 to 7 are always considered efficient. Well, that's if they're all there. And when they're community members and they have other lives and other jobs, you can't always get them there. And I don't want 2 or 3 people making decisions. So I'm gonna work on expanding the board to 9, and seeing if we can, have representation from around the city as part of that as well. And of course, diversity. And that board is quite diverse. It just hasn't functioned very, very well. And so I'll say they're citizen-led boards. So if you can't run a good meeting, if you don't keep good meeting notes, even though the bylaws say they're supposed to have an annual report, they didn't turn one in last year. Partly because there was internal dysfunction. They didn't have quorums at the meetings, so there's not notes. And so some people are, kind of looking at that. But that would be a really good group that could be asking the things that you're wanting. That group would be kind of the city's representation in order to get that information, and the citizen expert too. So feel free to.
So
you want to ask.
You mentioned 2 different groups, Police Oversight Committee and the Human Rights Commission, that are not running properly. What sort of accountability is being put in place so that these 2 different committees do run properly?
So the Human Rights Commission, I won't say that's a misspeak for that group. They have their issues right now. They're redoing their bylaws. That's a county commission, and they're redoing their bylaws. And there's been this: do we want these bylaws changes or not? And they have not been able to come to agreement. So as they're doing that, the government committee that I have control over, sort of, the citizen committee on police oversight, there's two of them. There's police civil service and police oversight. Both are citizens, all citizens. Those ones have had trouble making quorum. They've had consternation among members about what their role should be. So what I did was and not just because of the police oversight, so don't get me wrong, it wasn't just that committee. Several of the commissions were struggling. I held a training, and so my executive assistant and I provided a 3-hour training. We invited them all to it. I tried empowering them, explaining to them that this is your community opportunity to influence what happens in our city. We went through how to run a good meeting. We went through what requirements are. We went through what the members do and what is the one staff rep that comes to these meetings, what is their job. Unfortunately, you can't, what is the saying? You can take a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Is that appropriate? You can provide a training. You can invite everybody to tell them this is really important and I need you there. And we had 60 people come, but there's 115 or 20 members of those committees. Some of them didn't have any members show. So, what I could do is what I am doing is having people look at these boards and commissions and say, is what's in the writing correct? I had them evaluate their own bylaws, or not their bylaws, their the public policy that we have in place in our statute book, our policy book. Is this what you're doing? I had them read them. I sent them all to them and said, is this what you're working on? If it's not, tell me. If it is, tell me. And I got some response to that. I'm trying. But I thought I would get this done year one and we'd be ready to go. And it has just not worked that way. This is going to be long and ongoing. So frustrating sometimes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Stephen? I see you nope, okay. I saw you unmuted. I thought maybe you wanted to yell at me or something.
No, we are so grateful for.
Somebody unmuted me. I left me muted, but I'm on my sailboat working on my engine.
I'm jealous.
Yeah.
Me too.
And it's really hot in here too.
Sorry.
Well, we're glad you're here with us. Kim, what you shared was amazing. We appreciate so much your hard work. And we're going to give you one of our, go ahead, Doug, and show her the award we're going to give you. You're our everyday hero. Wow. And we're giving you our everyday hero award because.
Do I get superpowers with that?
Yes. Pardon me? Yes.
Superpowers? What superpowers come with this? I need some superpowers.
Well, I think you're using all your superpowers as is. You're so intuitive and dedicated. So since everyone is unmuted, let's give Kim a big round of applause.
Hey.
Oh, brother.
Thank you for being our everyday hero.
Happy to come talk. And if folks, you're always welcome to give me a call or email. Be a little patient during these crazy times. Sometimes it's, I'm trying to respond quickly, but I can't always get to you right away, but I will. So if you just reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good seeing all of you, even if it's far, far away.
Okay.
Bye, everybody. See you next week.
Bye.
Next week, we're having the Guatemala project update. So see you next week.
Everybody stay safe.
Yeah.
Yes.